Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire. Everything's on fire.
Welcome back, Heat Seekers. Week 9 is nearly in the books, and we've got your Week 10 waiver wire pickups. These are going to be some names that you probably have no clue who some of them are, because even going into it, we're not sure we want to know who they are. But that's the way the game unfolds. This is where we're at. We've come to this point in the season. As you can tell, I am joined by somebody you've not seen on waivers, but if you've watched literally any other show, he's probably been on it because he likes to dive in and help out. Our main man, Paul. What's going on, brother? How are you?
Fun weekend. Won most of my weeks. The Packers won. Bears lost. Good weekend.
I'm about to say Bears lost, Lions lost, Vikings lost because they won. I mean, it's losing all up and down the NFC North for you.
And I know what the answer is, but how was your fun weekend?
Mine was definitely enjoyable. Unfortunately, I did not. I watched literally zero football, and I'm glad I did because Michigan sucked on Saturday and the Lions sucked on Sunday. So I would rather have enjoyed the weekend ignoring football. It's all DVR'd, so I can go back and study the players that I need to study. But I'm glad I did not waste my time and energy on any of the tragic Michigan football that happened over the weekend. So that being said, my fantasy season seemed to be fine. I set the lineups Friday before we went on our weekend date away, my wife and I, and then I looked back and was like, oh, I set my lineups correctly and nobody had to get switched out, so I felt pretty good about that. I feared looking back this evening before the show that I would find many guys that maybe didn't play, or I had a few Stafford shares that I was starting. I was like, I wonder if he's even going to play. Then he got hurt, and I realized, well, that sucks. The concussion did not go well, but so what? So I can't complain. So far, so good. The leagues that I needed to win, I'm winning. So that's all that matters to me. The leagues that I'm rebuilding are whatever. And redrafts, it's a toss-up still. So.
And hopefully if you got issues with setting your lineup because of injuries and stuff, that's why we're here.
Oh, right.
That's why we're here tonight. We got 10 or so names that might be able to help you out.
Absolutely. I mean, because these guys are going to be coming in for guys that are injured, and it's interesting to see. It's interesting to see the injuries continue to pile up, and guys that are jumping into the equation that we would have never expected. There is one name on the list that if you'd have watched one of our earlier shows getting ready for the season to start, there was a running back that I named that I thought would be good, but he was in San Francisco at that time just because of the uncertainty of running back there behind Raheem Mostert. I thought he might get a chance. But then all of a sudden he showed up in Miami and had a chance. So I'm still feeling good about it. Wrong team, but still the guy at least showed up for a week. But we'll start with quarterback like we always do. We'll run through the list. As always, if you guys have questions, we've got a Facebook community. We've got a Discord community. You can find us on Twitter, those of us that do the Twitter situation. You can find us anywhere. If you have questions, it doesn't just have to be on the videos, but we love the comments in the videos. I watch them, Rick watches them, the team watches them, and we comment. So if you need us, we're here to help. With that being said, we're going to jump into quarterback. So we got 3. Teddy Bridgewater, who on ESPN and Yahoo is owned less than 42%. Kirk Cousins, who on ESPN and Yahoo are owned less than 32%. And then Alex Smith, nowhere. He's not owned anywhere. Paul, what's your take on these guys? How do you feel, and do you trust that they can give you some more than 1 week appeal?
Bridgewater, I've owned him for about 3 seasons just because he was so cheap. I know this is a redraft show, but he never really had a shot when he was in Minnesota. Just the offense was the AP handed off every snap, I form basically. And now that he has actual machinery around him, he looks pretty solid. I'm surprised that he's not owned in 40% of Yahoo leagues. He's a mid-range QB too. He should be owned. Cousins probably should end up owned, but he puts up enough 3, 4, 5 point weeks that I don't know if I see it. I would much rather own Bridgewater out of this list. And Alex Smith, he doesn't have any receivers there in Washington, and he doesn't have a lot of line help in front of him. It's unfortunate what happened to Allen. I hope he's he's fine for next year. But it's Bridgewater and then everyone else here, at least on this list of
Yeah.
three.
For me, it'd be Bridgewater, then it'd be Cousins, then it'd be Alex Smith. I mean, Alex Smith, from what I gathered, at least didn't look as rough as he did his first time back out on the field. So if you're really desperate, and it appears that he's serviceable, but that being said, he's checking down to his running backs a lot because he's got to get the ball out in under 3 seconds because he's just getting pressure galore. Um, Cam Sims, from looking at the stat lines, I didn't get to watch a lot of the Washington footage today, but looked like Cam Sims got a lot of targets, which tells you everything you need to know about that passing attack. Terry McLaurin, teams are just shutting him down and getting in his face and just stopping him because he's really their biggest weapon with all the other injuries and everything that's happened. I mean, it's a tough offense, so Alex Smith is a desperation play for you. I mean, he should be throwing a bunch because I can't imagine they're really ever really going to be leading in any games. But Bridgewater's the most consistent, the one I'm most comfortable with starting, and would be the guy I would recommend as well. Cousins should be behind and throwing a lot too. I know against Detroit it looked a lot different just because Detroit is just a garbage fire. I know that they don't think so, but that's a whole nother. I could do a show on how bad they are. Bridgewater, and on the other side of it, Bridgewater's completing over 70% of his passes this year. I mean, he looks to be reinvigorated with Matt Rule in this Carolina offense. He's moving the ball well. He's getting. I mean, he's only got, well, this was before the Chiefs game. I'm looking at Pro Football Reference stats. He's at 9 touchdowns and 6 picks, so he's maybe not as consistent with that as possible. So you have to know that he could throw you an interception here and there, but he's not throwing them at such a high rate that I feel terribly nervous about that. So if your league score negatively against interceptions, I wouldn't worry too much. I'm still very comfortable picking him up and playing him. Okay, so running back, we've got 4 this time because in theory, literally any one of these ones may not actually be starting next week, but they all have appeal because they've all seemed to be in situations where they could be producers next week and for the next few weeks. So we got Duke Johnson of the Texans. So David Johnson's in concussion protocol. He could very well be out for a minute. Duke Johnson was very serviceable, and that's the funny thing is, if you'd asked some of us on the team last year when Houston traded for him, we were all gung-ho that Duke Johnson's finally going to get his chance to be the man, and just hasn't monopolized. Wayne Gallman of the New York Giants. Devonta Freeman's kind of in and out of the lineup. They've got Alfred Morris who's been involved, but Gallman looks to be the most usable running back in that offense. He looks the part of a good running back. So until next season when Saquon's back, Gallman would be the guy I would trust with the workload. Tony Pollard of the Cowboys. He continues to get usage. And then a running back who's literally owned 0 places, Mod Salvon from the Miami Dolphins, who was a guy that started with the 49ers, and I was very excited about him as kind of this under the wire free agent guy that had a little bit of upside because I liked what I saw in college, but all of a sudden he was gone, and he shows up in Miami, and he's clearly better than Jordan Howard, who's the 1 yard per carry back, and literally everything else they have because Gaskin's on the shelf. So, Paul, what do you make of these 4 running backs? Do you trust them for more than a week? Do you trust them at all?
I just think it was funny that you're excited about him, that you mispronounced his name. It's Salvon Ahmed, not Ahmed.
Oh, I've read it backwards. I imported the spreadsheet into Google, and it flipped the column, so that was my bad. If you're watching, sir,
hopefully the weekend. Hopefully the long weekend was because you had a couple beverages. But anyways, I digress. Yeah, I don't see anyone out of the 4 that I want in my lineup, but if you own them as cuffs, sure, they could be starting next week. You could have none of them start. I don't want Salvon Ahmed just because he ran that 4.65 or whatever at 195. But Johnson's been fine when he's been the only option. Gallman, he looks better than what he's looked the last 3-4 years. Pollard looked fine. Obviously, he's not going to see the field versus what's in front of him most weeks, but he went 9 for 57 and had a reception. And it doesn't sound sexy, but Pittsburgh's legit, and they played like it. I would feel probably the most comfortable about him if I were forced into one of these situations, or if I were forced into one, assuming that the situation was, hey, this is our guy for the week because of injuries. But I mean, obviously, that's a fluid situation on all four of them.
Yeah, none of these guys are guys that you're going to be able to trust long term because the guy in front of them will be healthy and will be back. For me, if I'm ranking them, it's probably Gallman, Pollard, and Johnson are kind of right there with him, and then Ahmed's at the bottom. I mean, he probably will get another week, maybe two. Once Gaskin's back, Gaskin's going to be the guy. They liked him. Fun fact, though, I believe they both ran 4.65 40s, but I believe Gaskins is bigger dude. So they seem to have a style that they like in their running backs. So just for you to look into the future, those might be the types of running backs they like. But ultimately,
whoever runs a 4.7 next year, they'll be drafting in the second round. Book it.
I like it. All right, so a wide receiver. This is a fun list. So we got Curtis Samuel, the Carolina Panthers. He's owned in less than 43% of leagues. He's a guy that everybody's always kind of liked, but he's just never really been producing. But he's been producing lately. They've been getting him involved in different ways in the offense. He's a very nice piece, and I think watching some of the highlights of him today shows you why you like him, because he makes some of those acrobatic catches. He can do some things, and he's very dynamic. Tim Patrick from the Denver Broncos, he's owned in less than 23% of leagues, but appears to be one of their more consistent, reliable targets at this point in time. And then Michael Pittman of the Indianapolis Colts, owned in less than 10% of leagues. Like we were talking about before the show, Rivers likes big receivers. He likes a big target, and Michael Pittman is probably their biggest non-tight end target, and especially a receiver. I know he's probably the only one above 6'2". How do you feel about these guys, and rank them, kind of the ones that you're most interested in versus least?
It's almost like the QBs that we discussed before. There's the should be owned, meh, and only if you need a flyer. Curtis Samuel, he's been consistent enough, basically, because he's been eating DJ Moore's target share, which I don't know how long I see that happening for, but he's at least worth an ad or waiver priority here. Should be owned. Patrick, he's only seeing maybe 4 or 5 targets a week. It so happens that he's scoring on them frequently. I can't see that happening in the future, especially with the emergence of Fant and Albert O, who are other size receivers he likes. Pittman, I don't know if I would add him redraft wise, but if you're either super deep or you're just top heavy, maybe, but it's a pretty defined tier list for me.
Yeah, Patrick, I think, provides some intrigue just because of how well he's been playing. He's been with Denver for 3 years, and by far this is obviously the most successful year he's had. Catching almost 70% of the passes thrown his way. It appears Locke trusts him, and Locke is, though he slow starts the games, he's really comes on as the game goes on, and it looks like he's targeting him and the tight ends pretty well. And if they keep playing from behind, I feel comfortable that Patrick will get probably 4 to 6 targets, and he'll probably wind up catching 3 to 5 of those. I mean, he's obviously not catching everything, but he's pretty good. He's pretty solid. Locke likes him and locks onto him. But I agree with you. As these tight ends continue to emerge, I know Fant was hobbling a bit today, so I don't know a ton about that.
He went back
did he go back in? Okay.
He went back in.
So, if there is any kind of thing where we see some of another player go down, Patrick still will keep that consistency. But, that's another one of those. Receivers tend to be, especially this year, there have been a lot of receiver injuries, but there's so many receivers in the market that this is a desperation. If you need a guy that probably won't get you an amazing boom, but will probably get you at least some consistent production. He's a guy you can add and be okay with. Curtis Samuel would obviously, would be my top option though, because there is clearly a defined role in that offense, and it's not going away. They trust him. He's dynamic and is doing some good things. Pittman, he's a waiver wire pickup if you really need some help, and some of these other guys are not available. Because I would like to, as Craig likes to say it, I want to see a little bit more. I want to see more consistency for a little bit longer period of time. But definitely, if you want to get ahead of it and you think that this is here to stay, then jump on it now and get it before somebody else does.
Yeah, and I know this isn't exactly the follow the consistency argument, but one argument that's against Patrick is the fact that before the week, the rookie receivers were Lamb 1, Jefferson 1A, kind of a tier break and maybe a second one, and then Judy. He looked like a top half wide receiver 1 this week. At least for like actual football. Like, was he one of the 16 best actual NFL receivers? This week, the answer was yes. He could eat into all the other targets for everyone else on that offense, thus making the tier break here for me just that much larger.
And that's I completely agree. That could definitely happen. My struggle with some of Pittman is Rivers. Like, Rivers drives me crazy. Like, why is Jacoby Brissett not getting another chance? At least he's got an arm and can push it down the field. Even if you don't like maybe some of the decisions he makes, I mean, what's any worse than Rivers? But
yeah, he looks old, slow, and washed up.
Agreed. All right, so to round it out, speaking of old, slow, and washed up, we're going to talk about tight ends. Number 1 on this list, Jimmy Graham, Chicago Bears. He's owned, which was surprising, less than 57% of leagues. And actually, in Yahoo leagues, he's actually under 50% ownership. Clearly a guy that they continue to target, so definitely somebody you should target. Irv Smith Jr. had a big breakout game against the Lions, put up 2 touchdowns, made him look silly, but most people do these days. And then Dallas Goedert, again, people. Every week for the last 3 weeks, we've been telling you, grab Dallas Goedert. Grab him. And yet he's still owned under 55% of the ESPN and Yahoo leagues. Grab Dallas Goedert. Zach Ertz is on the shelf. He's arguably their 1A option in the receiving game. Him and Rager are probably their 2 top options, depending on how you factor in the running backs. He easily should be owned in 75+% of leagues. Like, that's what I expected to see. When we put his name on the list, I went, no, he's got to be owned way more. Pick him up. You need tight end help. I'm fairly confident of that. What do you think of these tight ends, Paul?
Yeah, I'll get behind basically everything you said. Graham should be owned. He's a mid-level TE1. I know he doesn't have the ceiling that all the other ones do, but it's tight end. You're looking for floor. Goddard's about the same. That one just seems like a reaction to the Eagles were off this week. That number should end up as being higher moving forward, but some guys are too reactionary, and they're going to want to see it for 3 weeks, and then he's not going to be owned, or he's not going to be on their wire any longer. As far as Irv Smith, he did have 2 scores, but they were only for 5 yards.
Right.
2 receptions on 4 targets. He's been pretty sneakily heading up in that 2, 3, 4, and this is a redraft centric theme, not dynasty. He's someone I'm looking at severely for dynasty heading forward, but not necessarily redraft unless you're super desperate for it, or you see Rudolph injured or one of the receivers injured, because he can legit split out and play a receiver. But yeah,
agreed.
That's
and
also because it's been a couple weeks since we've had a show, and Brad and I are the defensive ones. You're getting a couple bonus nachos on this one. If you do play defensive leagues, the Bills, they put Matt Milano on injured reserve, And AJ Klein he's always been solid, but a little bit slow, but he's consistent and he gets tackles. Also, Tyrell Adams for Houston. If you play with the scoring that we have the last 4 weeks, he's got 17, 15, 11, and 9. It's consistent enough for what you're looking for. Again, if you flipped off the show because it's you don't play defense, I got you.
You're missing out.
I get it. You're missing out, but I got you. Also, quick hitters don't add Balaj either. I know he looked fine, but he's got 4, 5, or 6 seasons worth of horrible tape, and Richie James was a complete fluke. They didn't have anyone else, and he scored at the end of the game there. Not saying you shouldn't maybe keep an eye on them, but they're not good.
No, not worth your time. I'll say that much.
Correct.
And that's that, people. It's in the books. Again, if you need anything, post comments, hit us up on Facebook, Discord, all the places. Until next time, thank you, Paul, for hanging out with us. We will talk to you again next Sunday.
Also, right there, playlist. Hit it. Watch the videos. Do it. You want to. Do it.